Dark times don't create monsters. They just turn the lights on so you can finally see the ones that were already there. You've been watching the wrong people. You've been waiting for them to crack under pressure, hoping that when things got hard enough, when the world squeezed them tight enough, they'd finally show you what they were really made of. And they did. They folded. They lied. They disappeared. They called it survival. You called it betrayal, but I'd call it clarification. Because here's what no one tells you about pressure. No therapist, no self-help book. No well-meaning friend who calls you at exactly the wrong moment, with exactly the wrong tone of voice. Pressure doesn't transform people. It reveals them. It strips off everything they worked so very hard to present to you, everything carefully arranged, every performance polished until it shone. And underneath, there they are, exactly who they always were. And what about you? What did the pressure reveal about you? That's the part you've been avoiding. Because it's easy, almost beautiful in its simplicity, to stand back and catalog the failures of everyone around you when everything collapses. To notice, with great clarity, that the people you trusted most were the least prepared to deserve it. But the question that keeps you up at 3 a.m, the one you've already heard and immediately covered with noise and distraction and anything that isn't silence, that question is, who are you when things fall apart? Not who you want to be. Not who you tell yourself you're becoming. Who are you? Right now, in the dark, when no one is watching and the pressure is real and the stakes actually matter? I know what you think the answer is. I'm not sure you do. Stick around. This is going to be interesting. Let's talk about comfort, not as a luxury, as a drug. You have been, for most of your life, carefully, methodically, almost architecturally insulating yourself from difficulty. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean it as an observation. The way you might observe that a very expensive watch has 17 moving parts. Interesting, precise, and completely useless the moment it hits the floor. Because that's what happened, isn't it? Things hit the floor. The relationship, the job, the plan you've been carrying in your head for 3 years, like a lantern against the dark, it all hit the floor. And in the wreckage, you looked around at the people who were supposed to be there, and you discovered something disturbing. Not that they were gone, that they were never quite what you believed they were. That the version of them you'd constructed in your head, the reliable one, the loyal one, the one who would still be standing when the smoke cleared, that version was yours, not theirs. And here is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Because the human mind, when confronted with that kind of collapse, does something I find deeply, almost tenderly absurd. It doesn't ask, what can I learn from this? It asks, how do I make sure this never happens again? And so you built new walls, smarter walls. You became more selective, more strategic. You stopped sharing things that mattered until you'd already confirmed 12 times over that the person receiving them wouldn't use them against you. You called this growth. You called this wisdom. Your friends called it being more guarded, in that careful tone that means they're worried about you but don't know how to say it without making things worse. What it actually was. And I want you to sit with this, not rush past it towards something more comfortable. What it actually was fear in a very good coat. I once knew a man deeply committed to doing good, genuinely, impressive in his certainty, who had this habit of appearing only once a situation was already impossible. He'd arrive, do precisely what was necessary, never a word more than required, and then vanish back into whichever shadow seemed most convenient. He told himself he was protecting people. I always thought it was more interesting than that. I thought he was protecting something else entirely. And that something else was the version of himself that got to remain unseen, undefined, never fully known. You can't fail at being yourself if no one knows who you are. Can you? But that's not you. Not quite. Your version is subtler. Your version is the person who shows up consistently, impressively, with everything required, but never all the way. There's always something held back. A reserve. A last 5% of yourself that you keep in a room with a very complicated lock. And the key is conditional on a level of certainty that no one can ever fully provide. Because certainty doesn't exist, and you know that. Which means the room stays locked. Which means you stay safe. And which means, if we are being precise about this, you stay alone. Not physically alone. Emotionally alone? The kind of alone that happens in rooms full of people? The kind that follows you into conversations you thought were going well and sits in a chair beside you with its arms folded and waits. Dark times did not create this. Dark times found it. They pulled back whatever remained of the performance. The carefully maintained distance between what you feel and what you show. And they held a very unpleasant mirror up to the architecture of your avoidance. And what they revealed wasn't weakness. I want to be precise about this. What they revealed was a strategy. An intelligent, adaptive, entirely reasonable strategy that was built for survival and has since become the bars of a cage that you constructed yourself and now cannot find the door of. So here is the question underneath everything else. The one you've been circling like a man who really doesn't want to touch the stove but cannot stop looking at it. What are you actually afraid will happen if you stop protecting yourself quite so carefully? They call it hardship. They call it adversity. They package it up with very clean words that have the scent of something survivable, something you push through, put behind you, and then reference at dinner parties to explain why you're stronger than you look. But that's not what this is. What you've been living through is not hardship in the brochure sense. It's not the thing that makes a person interesting. It is the thing, the specific, grinding, unglamorous, profoundly unheroic thing that dismantles every story you were telling about yourself and asks you with no warmth whatsoever to find out if there's anything underneath it. The word adversity lets people off the hook too quickly. It implies a narrative arc. It implies that after a suitable interval of difficulty, it implies that after a suitable interval of difficulty, meaning arrives, revelation occurs. The music swells, and you come out the other side wearing the experience like a medal. Here's what I actually know about dark times. They don't resolve, they reveal. And what they reveal is not a better version of you waiting patiently to be released. What they reveal is the exact shape of what you actually value when you cannot afford to value anything that isn't real. The people who couldn't stand beside you when it cost them something, they revealed their value system. The ones who stayed, they revealed theirs. And you, in how you responded, in what you protected, and what you were willing to break, and what you were willing to break, and what you were not, you revealed yours too. Hardship is not a season. It's a mirror. And the most dangerous thing you can do is walk away before you finish looking. The comfortable life is not the goal. It was the trap. I know that's not what anyone told you. I know the story you were sold. Work hard enough, arrange things carefully enough, build the right structure around the right relationships with the right professional trajectory, and eventually things settle. Eventually you arrive somewhere stable. Eventually you arrive somewhere stable. Eventually the difficulty becomes manageable, and the uncertainty becomes a thing that happens to other people. What actually happens is this. When you remove difficulty from a life long enough, you don't strengthen the person living it. You soften them. And I mean that in the specific anatomical sense. The way a muscle that is never tested atrophies, becomes uncertain of itself, forgets what it was built for. Comfort, extended and uninterrupted, does not build resilience. It teaches the body and the mind that ease is the default, that discomfort is an error, that anything which requires more than you currently want to give is a problem to be solved, rather than a fact to be navigated. And then dark times come, because they always come. They are constitutionally incapable of not coming. The universe has a very consistent record on this, and you find out in very concrete terms that you have been training for the wrong event. The real origin of the person you are in a crisis is not the crisis. It is every moment before it. Every decision to take the easier path. Every decision to take the easier path. Every discomfort you stepped around instead of through. Every time you chose protection over exposure. Safety over honesty. Comfort over whatever the harder thing was. This is not a judgment. It is a map, and a map is only useful if you are willing to look at where you actually are. The people who look at someone in the middle of real difficulty, real, structural, bone-deep difficulty, and decide that what's most appropriate is evaluation, those people fascinate me. Not because they're cruel. Most of them aren't. They're frightened. And the judgment is the distance they need to keep between themselves and the thing they're watching. Because if it can happen to you, it can happen to them, and that is a thought they have not yet been brave enough to finish. The ones who step back from you in dark times, who suddenly have less to say, whose availability becomes mysteriously limited, whose interest in your situation develops a strange selective quality. They're not showing you who they are in the moment of your difficulty. They're showing you who they are in the moment of their own fear. I knew a man who had elaborate rules for when and how he would intervene in other people's difficulties. Very principled. Very consistent. He had this remarkable ability to calculate it in real time exactly how much of himself a situation required, and then offer precisely that much with nothing left over. He called it discipline. I found it a fascinating illustration of how a person can build a moral architecture entirely designed to keep them from ever being surprised by their own limits. The architecture was impeccable. The man inside it, I always suspected, was considerably less certain than the architecture suggested. The judgment of comfortable people about people in crisis is not moral authority. It is the sound of someone standing at a safe distance from a fire and explaining at length what the person inside should have done differently. Their comfort is not evidence of their superiority. It is evidence of their luck, their avoidance, or both. Here is something worth knowing about the people who have been through genuine difficulty and come out the other side, not broken, but recalibrated. They are the most accurate people in any room. Accurate about themselves, what they can sustain, what they can. Where their actual limits are versus where they thought they were. Accurate about other people, who shows up, who disappears, who tells the truth when the truth is inconvenient. Accurate about what actually matters when everything non-essential has been stripped away. This accuracy is not comfortable to be around. People who have not been tested tend to find it unsettling. There is something in the directness of a person who has nothing left to lose from honesty, Something that bypasses the usual social choreography and gets to whatever the actual thing is a little faster than most people prefer. But in any real situation, any situation where the stakes are actual rather than performed, that person is invaluable because they have already been to the place where things fall apart, and they did not die there, and they know in their bones what can be counted on and what is decoration. Difficulty, insufficient quantity and duration does not make a person fragile. It makes them precise. There is a version of this, of having been through dark times, of carrying that weight, that becomes its own kind of prison. The person who survived something real and then built an identity entirely around the survival. Who measures every new relationship against the ones that failed? Who cannot enter a room without cataloging the exits? Who has confused vigilance with wisdom and protection with living? That version is the trait misused. It is the knife carried in panic, clutched so tightly that it cuts the hand, holding it. And then there is the other version. The person who went through it, who felt the full weight of what dark times actually are. And then, without ceremony, without anyone noticing the exact moment it happened, decided to keep going in a different orientation. Not pretending it didn't happen, not performing recovery, not demanding that the world acknowledge, gauge the distance they've traveled. Just different, quieter, in the places they used to be loud. Just different, more certain in the places they used to be performatively confident, more willing to sit with difficulty in other people because they know experientially that sitting with it is sometimes the only thing that actually helps. That version is the knife held with intent. Steady, purposeful, no wasted motion. The difference between them is not time. It is the willingness to stop defining yourself by the thing that happened and start being defined. Instead, by what you chose to do with the person it made you into. The words you use inside your own head are not neutral. They are not just descriptions. They are the frame around every experience you've had, every decision you're making, every version of yourself you're either building or dismantling. You have been using the wrong words. When something hard happens, the internal vocabulary that fires first. Falling apart. Can't handle this. Not strong enough. This is too much. That language is not honesty. It is habit. Specifically, it is the habit formed by a mind that learned early and thoroughly that difficulty was a verdict rather than an event. Replace it, not with performance words, not with the hollow gymnasium poster assertion that you are built for this, that you've got this, that everything is going to be fine. Replace it with accurate words. Not, I can't handle this, but this is difficult. I am in it. I don't have to solve it today. Not I'm falling apart, but this is what pressure actually feels like. I've been here before. I didn't die there. Not why is this happening to me, but what is this showing me that I couldn't see from a more comfortable position? The shift is not from negative to positive. It is from reactive to precise. Precision is what the mind needs when the situation is real. Comfort is what the mind asks for when it is afraid. Give it precision. It will learn to trust the difference. Some of the rooms you're in were not built for you. They were built for a version of you. A more manageable version, a quieter version, a version that had learned to want less than it actually wanted, and to need less than it actually needed. These rooms did not set out to diminish you. Most of them didn't even notice they were doing it. But you have been spending hours, days, years in spaces that operate on the implicit assumption that the way to function here is to be smaller. And when dark times came, those spaces didn't know what to do with you. because dark times are, by their nature, not small. Audit the rooms, not dramatically, not with a speech or an announcement or a departure anyone will notice, just with honesty. Which relationships require you to understate what you're actually experiencing in order to remain in them? Which environments treat directness as a character flaw and silence as a sign of stability? Which conversations leave you, at the end, feeling not refreshed but performed as though you spent an hour maintaining something rather than saying anything real? Those are the rooms that were designed for your comfort, not your growth. Comfort kept you in them. Dark times showed you the difference. The audit is simply deciding what to do with what you now know. The next time someone looks at you, at the particular way you've emerged from difficulty, at the sharpness that wasn't there before, at the directness that used to be cushioned and is no longer, and decides to call it damage, to label it a harshness, to diagnose it as something that needs to be managed or softened or returned to whatever more palatable shape you used to hold, this is what you say. Inside, to yourself. Before you decide whether to speak, or simply look at them with a particular kind of patience that has nothing to do with being patient, you are reading me with the vocabulary you have. It isn't enough for what I've become. And then, if they persist, I don't need you to understand this. I need you to make room for it. Not aggressive, not defensive, just certain. The certainty of someone who has been somewhere real and returned with the vocabulary of having actually been there. No apology required. No translation offered. Just the quiet, immovable fact of who you are now. This is the last one. And it is the one that doesn't sound like a shift at all, because it isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive with a decision or a declaration or a moment anyone would make a film about. It arrives the way most real things do, quietly. Was the way most real things do, quietly, without announcement, somewhere in the middle of an ordinary day. When you realize that you have stopped waiting to be told that what you went through was real, that it mattered, that the person you are on the other side of it is worth something, you stopped waiting because you already know. Not because someone told you, not because you've convinced yourself, but because you looked at the specific texture of what you survived, not the sanitized version, the version you tell at a dinner party, but the actual version, the one you know in the dark, and you found that there is something there. Something that doesn't require permission to be recognized. Something that was built in the exact shape of the difficulty that made it. The ownership statement is not, I am proud of myself. That's still performance. It's still for someone. The ownership statement is simply, I know what I am made of. I have been shown. I did not look away. That's enough. It was always enough. You just needed dark times to confirm it. Here is the larger truth that no one wants to say out loud, because it is inconvenient and it does not suppose or anything, and it does not resolve neatly in the time it takes to finish a video. The world you are taught to navigate was designed by people who had decided collectively and without much discussion, collectively and without much discussion. That stability was the highest virtue. That consistency was the goal. That the person who never appeared to struggle was the person worth admiring. And so you learn to manage your struggles privately, to solve them quickly, to present, always, the version of yourself that required the least from whoever was watching. Dark times didn't just disrupt your life. They disrupted the operating system. The one that told you how to be acceptable, how to be liked, how to be the version of yourself that made the room comfortable. And when it disrupted, you had a choice you probably didn't even realize was a choice. you could rebuild the same system faster and more efficiently and get back to the performance as quickly as possible. Most people do this. It's not weakness. It's the deepest kind of exhaustion. The kind that comes from having been genuinely spent and not knowing what else there is to reach for. Or you could look at what was left when the system went down. The unperformed version. The one that had been running underneath the whole time. The waiting with no particular impatience for the moment when there was nothing left to hide behind. That version is not polished. It is not ready for the room in the way you've been trained to be ready for rooms. It has sharp edges where the soft ones used to be. It has a clarity that makes some people uncomfortable, because clarity in a person who has been through real difficulty has a kind of weight to it, a specific gravity that comes from having been tested and found. Against all reasonable expectations still standing, you are not the person you were before the dark times. You will not be that person again. And the sooner you stop grieving that person, stop trying to reconstruct them, stop apologizing to everyone around you that the reconstruction is taking longer than expected, the sooner you can begin to find out what the person you actually are is capable of, which I suspect is considerably more than the person you used to perform. The monsters the dark reveals are not always the ones around you. Sometimes, the most interesting times, they're the stories you are telling yourself about your limits, about your worth, about how much of yourself you were allowed to take up. Dark times turn the lights on. What you do with the seeing is entirely up to you.